their excellencies, the various ministers, dignitaries, and other of our friends and colleagues who came from across the country and from all parts of the world. I'd like to start my talk by a small quote from the philosopher George Santayana. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Those of us of a certain age, I would hazard the guess that I'm probably the oldest person here. 50 years ago, I was a junior investment officer at the World Bank. This was 1972. 1 year later, the famous OPEC crisis, the doubling, then quadrupling of oil prices hit the world economy. And frankly, there are very eerie reminders of what happened 50 years ago. 50 years ago, of course, the events are not exactly the same, but there are enough similarities in them that we should draw very serious lessons from how the world tackled the energy crisis of the 1970s and the attendant issues that flew from there. This was a decade of stagflation. This was a decade when we had conflicts, global conflicts, bracketing that decade. This was a decade when there were major structural shifts in the world economy that moved it from one set of variables and one set of certainties to another. And we are now, I would say, in a very similar situation now. How did the world cope with the crisis of the 1970s? And how are we going to cope with the crisis of the post-COVID, post-Russo-Ukrainian war? Although, in my opinion, the crisis actually started much earlier than that, in 2007, 2008, with the global financial crisis, whose effects we are still feeling. So what happened in the early 1970s? Well, the wars were the wars of the Arab-Israeli War of the late 1960s, 1967. We had the Vietnam War. Both of them played a very large part as setting the stage for the 1973 oil price increase. I remember vividly those days when the oil price went up from what was then something like $3. Believe it or not, that was the price then. It was something called the posted price, which was basically a price set by the major oil companies, and whether we liked it or not, it was the world transactional price which was imposed on the oil-producing countries. There was an attempt to effect it by an impartial boycott of the oil producers, the Arab oil producers, in 1967. It didn't work. But what happened was that the world was shifting. The balance of power was shifting from the energy consumers, mainly in the Western world, in Japan. At that time, Asia had not yet risen to where it is now. And oil was becoming an increasingly scarce commodity. So something had to give. And what gave was a series of events before the 1973 oil price crisis. First of all, we had the collapse of the Bretton Woods system. Those of you who know a bit of economic history, that after World War II, the system of international financial transactions was based on the dollar-gold relationship, which was set at the Bretton Woods Conference. And for the information of the audience, Iraq was actually at that conference, was well represented and had a say in the final outcome. A small say, but nevertheless a say. So the Bretton Woods system collapsed in 1971 when President Nixon refused to honor the commitment of converting dollars held by central banks abroad into gold. So we moved into an era of floating currencies. The second great thing that happened before the oil price change was a massive commodity boom. Between 1972 and 1974, commodity prices went through the roof. Fertilizer, which we're talking about now, went up about 5 times in price. So there was an environment of shortages, environment of crisis, environment of strains in the international economic system that was exacerbated by the October War of 1973, nearly 50 years ago. And in that war, the opportunity was seized by the major oil producers, initiated early on by Libya and then taken up by Iran and by Saudi Arabia, so that at the famous OPEC conference in July, I believe, of 1974, we had the first increase in oil price of 70%, and by the end of the decade, with the outbreak of the Iran-Iraq war, the oil price had reached $40. The amount of resources that flew into the oil exporting countries was really enormous by the measures of those times. The first cycle was around $200 billion. By the end of the decade, there was about $600 billion of surpluses sitting in the central banks. And this was the days before the sovereign wealth funds of the various oil exporting countries. But the world adjusted. There's no question about that. The world adjusted for the last 50 years or 40 years through 2 major developments that hasn't yet been properly understood by economists and by economic historians. First of all, the energy intensity decreased enormously. There was a huge increase in the energy efficiency of technologies and transport systems that evolved in the 1970s, post-1970s. You may not recall, but in those days, the average mileage of a car was around maybe 15 miles to the gallon. An unheard of level now. It's probably 3 or 4 times that. All appliances, industrial users of energy were extremely profligate. By the 1980s, there was serious moves to improve and radically improve the energy efficiency of both industries and appliances and transport systems. So this would indicate a decline in global demand. But what happened was the rise of Asia, the rise of China in particular, and India to a lesser extent, compensated for the per capita drop in oil consumption by the Western countries. Both of these factors were critical in maintaining the demand for oil of the OPEC oil-producing countries. Currently, OPEC exporters may be in the vicinity of around 100 million barrels a day. I'm sure His Excellency and Dr. Janabi can know the exact figures. That was about the same figure 50 years ago. So in 50 years, the amount of oil that the oil exporting countries has not shifted that much, while the world economy has grown by maybe a factor of 3.5 times. So global GDP went up enormously and increased spectacularly after the 1990s with globalization. But the energy efficiency also went up. 2 factors that we have now were not prevalent in the crisis of the 1970s. One of them was the environmental impact of energy projects. The impact side of capital investments of this size were not factored in the capex decisions of the major oil companies of the 1970s and even onto the 1980s. The other factor that we have to look at now is climate change. Climate change was not on the cards in the 1970s. People talked about it, but it was really on the fringes, an outlier. The environmental aspects became more and more significant and became essential to the design and implementation of energy projects. And climate is now another critical issue. The third factor that was not prevalent in the 1970s and 80s was what I would call the economics of renewable energy. Renewable energy was known. I mean, wind power, solar power were all known. Nuclear was not yet the infamous thing it later became with 3 Mile Island and the Fukuyama and Chernobyl. People were still building nuclear power plants. But the renewable energy alternative was only theoretical. After this period, with the shifts that we had, the global shifts and adjustments, to some extent the oil price has been stable in the last few years before the most recent crisis. But I'd like to remind the audience that between the heights of the 1979 oil price spike, where it reached around $45 a barrel, and between the depths, which was about 5 years later, in the early 80s, when oil prices dropped to around $10. It was only a matter of a few years. So volatility and fluctuation is built into this. And the reasons why the world has not shifted to what was purported to be the alternative in the 1980s was what I had just outlined. So we have now substitution on the cards, and we have now an acceleration of the transition masked by what we see now as fundamental shortages that appear on the global market. If you look at the numbers now, some of the numbers are unprecedented. The spikes that we had of above about $140 in 10 years ago are being apparently replicated now. But we also have to contextualize it against the background of not a very benign international environment for the oil exporting countries. So at the same time, the shock of 2022 and 2021 is not the same as the shock of the 1970s. It's much less significant. It's important, it affects people, but the 1970s shocks was really pervasive and affected the entire Western economies and Japan in a fundamental way. However, all shocks of this kind accelerate transitions to a different structure, not only of the energy market, but also of the global trading market. Stagflation of the 70s, which is a combination of high inflation, increasing protectionism, reducing the rate of growth of world trade, is coming back. Stagflation now is a very important issue in most Western countries. And when I say most Western countries, I mean the G7 countries, to which, if you look at the global economy as a whole, you have to now include China and India. China was an insignificant player in the 1970s. The per capita income of China in 1976 was $200. It was possibly one of the lowest 5 countries in the world in per capita income. The spectacular growth of the economy of China is really unprecedented in all economic history and may continue, I think, into the next decade. Russia was effectively closed off the world market. Even its energy exports were not that significant. They were limited to certain parts of Europe, and it was not a major international oil trader. So withdrawal of the Russian oil of the 1970s did not really have an impact. I'm saying all of this really to set the stage as to what we in Iraq should do and how we should position ourselves in light of the expected outcomes in the next 5 to 10 years. So these are the variables that I'm putting out there that have to be looked at by our policymakers, our lawmakers, and to create and design the appropriate strategies to navigate forward. We are not where we were in 1979. At the outbreak of the Iran-Iraq war, the population of this country was around 18 million people. We were extremely flush with cash. There was about $45 billion. I'm talking about 1979 dollars in the Central Bank of Iraq. We were poised to break out of decades of underdevelopment, poverty, but we made the wrong choices. We made the wrong choices politically, we made the wrong choices strategically, we made the wrong choices economically. Now we are faced with a similar set of issues in a different context. And again, if we don't reflect on the past, we're not likely to come up with the right mix of strategies and policies going forward. So is oil going to be under secular attack in the next decade? Probably not. But we can be sure in the next 20 or 25 years, the composition of world energy demand will shift and shift in a radical way. We cannot afford as a country not to be aware of the risks that that entails. We have also great rigidities in the economic structure of this country that we must overcome if we're going to reposition ourselves. There are many kinds of oil producers. There are the oil producers who have high incomes and high level of exports, mainly in the Gulf Arab countries. We have producers like Iran and Iraq, which are middle income countries, but high output countries. Their needs are entirely different. Their demands are entirely different, and their situation in the global economy is different. We have middle income, middle output countries like Algeria and Oman. And then we have low income, middle output countries, mainly our African friends, Nigeria and Angola. And then we have suppliers who are outside of the framework of OPEC entirely, which is primarily the United States. And we have suppliers who coordinate with OPEC in the management of the global market, Russia. Each one of these groups has a different approach to what constitutes their energy security in the next decade. Each one of them has different initial conditions. Each one of them has to design its own set of policies in an environment that is changing and that will optimize, even maximize, the welfare of their people and citizens in a global environment in which protectionism, in which globalization is retreating. It's not an easy task. I think the single most important decision that Iraq has to do is to move into what I would call value-added oil exports. Now, I'm not going back to the formula of the 1970s, like the Shah of Iran said that we don't want to export oil anymore, we want to export aspirin. By that he meant we want to export value-added products. The same thing must apply to a country like Iraq. We can rely on the fact that we are a low cost or even the lowest cost producer in the OPEC countries, so that we will be able to sell the last barrel that is in demand. But those who are competing to be able to sell the last barrel because of low cost structures have an entirely different financial and economic structure. We're talking about countries that have maybe $2 trillion in the case of the sovereign wealth funds of the United Arab Emirates. We're talking about Saudi Arabia with probably, if you include private investors abroad, a similar figure. If we look at Qatar, its sovereign wealth funds, central bank reserves, other sources of public investment vehicle, is in the $1 trillion. I'm not saying that they want to live off their interest and on their dividends, but they could. We can't. We are not in that situation. We're not in the situation of high income, high output countries. We must think as to what will happen to our people when the last barrel is sold at the best possible price. One way, of course, is to look at it in terms of, as I said, value-added products. But what can replace the 3.5, 4 million barrels a day that we export now, going up maybe to 5 million barrels? Can we afford to be constantly pumping out oil into a global market where the structure is working against us, even though not in the short term? My answer is no. We have to really seriously think about shifting our capital investment program, sustaining the oil production as it is, but shifting into value added. Iraq must not become an oil exporter only. It must become an energy exporter. And by that I mean we have to see down the stream what is happening in Western markets, what's happening in Asian markets. And there, with all the shifts that are taking place, the global demand for electricity is going to grow at higher than global growth rates. There's no question about that. International trade in electricity is merely 2% of total electricity supplied. There's a massive opportunity for us to reposition our country at the margin going forward into electricity, to become a major electricity supplier. Now, this might sound rather ridiculous given the fact that we are currently in a constant deficit. But I'm talking about supplies of power into the global market, linked with submarine cables, using the best up-to-date technologies, and massively focusing on carbon capture and sequestration. If we're able to meet the environmental impacts of such huge investments in the energy sector, in the energy generating sector, if we're able to meet the demands made in terms of technology, up-to-date, efficient technology in the thermal power sector, then we can begin to shift part of our oil exports to, in fact, electricity exports. Now, the whole cycle, I think, can be a virtuous cycle, because Iraq also is in desperate need to increase its green cover. We have continuing desertification. We have issues that are related to the loss of green cover. We have issues relating to the fall in agricultural output and the decline in productivity of agriculture. The CO2 that may be generated more at the margin in spite of carbon capture can be utilized to make a massive investment in what I would call the greening of Iraq. We have to replant this country in a massive way. And plants, biological carbon capture is a far superior and a far more effective method of carbon capture on a large scale than mechanical carbon capture. So this virtuous circle, looking 10, 15 years down the line, the students here would have graduated and have taken up their role in government and private business. this is, I hope, the kind of environment that they will see. Environment where Iraq is linked to the world through a network of electricity and energy trading. It can become an energy trading hub of the world. And the carbon associated with that will either be captured or massively redeployed through biological carbon capture into replanting and reforestating this country. So if we make the right choices, if we make the right decisions, we have, I think, a very good part to play in the global economy looking 10 years down the line. If we make the wrong decisions, we are likely to repeat, as George Santayana said, the mistakes of the past. We cannot afford not to invest, and invest in a big way, in the repositioning of our energy mix. We were given this bounty. It's a massive bounty. And in the last 40 years, we have squandered it. We have squandered it by stupid wars, by ridiculous confrontations, by dictatorial regimes that are unaccountable, and by dysfunctional government, and by constant demands on this limited resource in an unproductive way. So I look forward, really. I mean, we hope in this energy forum these issues will arise and that we can discuss them in much greater detail, and that some kind of consensus is reached, both in terms of lawmakers, policymakers, political leaders, and the public as a whole, that we have another opportunity to reposition ourselves. If we make the right choices with the right partners, with the right strategic orientation, I think this country can easily be the world center of energy trading for the 21st century and beyond. Thank you very much, and I'd like to conclude.
Just a moment, please. Your Excellency Alawi, thank you. The Forum is delighted to welcome our next keynote speaker. He is the current Secretary General of OPEC. His Excellency Mohammed Sanusi Barkindo has a vast wealth of experience in the oil and gas industry, both in Nigeria and internationally. He was Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation and Deputy Managing Director of Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas. As the leader of Nigeria's technical delegation to UN negotiations since 1991, His Excellency has contributed to producing the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Kyoto Protocol. Your Excellency.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates to this very important conference, I say it's a very great pleasure and indeed an honor for us in OPEC to be in the midst of this distinguished audience. I had listened attentively to the very rich remarks by Deputy Prime Minister Ali Alawi. And as he went through his thesis, he appropriately laid down the historical background. I'm not sure I agree with him that he was the oldest person in the room. But nevertheless, I think some of us had also lived through those periods, history-making periods that he talked about. And I think to fully comprehend the current dynamics, the current challenges, it's absolutely necessary to understand the past. And so I fully agree with you, Professor Alawi, when you quoted that famous quote. And being in this center of learning that promises to be among the greatest in the world, there is no better place to table these issues for discussions without flags, without national identities, to benefit from the very rich reservoir of knowledge and expertise that is gradually being assembled in this great institution. And let me also congratulate the President, Mike, my new prof. Mike has already offered me my next job to retire here in Baghdad and join this prestigious institution. I'm very honored, Mike. I'm very grateful. I believe that Professor Alawi will also endorse that generous offer. It is both an honor and my distinct privilege to have the opportunity to participate in this 6th edition. How time flies. I regularly participated in the forum since its early years and always admired our friend and colleague, Dr. Louis Al-Khatib, his valuable contributions as the prime mover of the IEF and elevating it to new levels with remarkable achievements. On behalf of OPEC and my colleagues, I would like to congratulate Dr. Louis Al-Khatib and all his team for all these well-carved and lasting accomplishments. I have had many occasions during my career to visit this great country of Iraq, both as Secretary General And before that as well, as always, returning to Baghdad feels like coming home. And here I accept the offer of Professor Alawi when he told me earlier, stop saying you are coming to your second home. This is your home. I fully agree with you, Your Excellency. Indeed, I was regularly in Iraq every year since I assumed office in August of 2016, except during the pandemic. As the birthplace of our organization, OPEC, it is always a special honor to return to this ancient city with all of its splendor and majesty. I was last here just in January. In addition to these highly successful meetings, I had the great privilege of visiting the ancient city of Ur, the city of Abraham, Abu al-Anbiya. It was truly an experience of a lifetime to visit this prestigious ancient site and was inhabited by several dynasties, including the Sumerians. I highly commend the government of Iraq for meticulously and admirably preserving this and other many ancient sites for the benefit of all humanity. Iraq is truly a blessed country and blessed people with rich history, architecture, and religious sites that are revered all around the world. I have great memories and feel blessed to have regular pilgrimage to the shrines of Najaf to visit the Imam of humanity, Imam Ali, of blessed memory, Karbala, to visit Imam Hussein and Abbas, as well as Masjid al-Kufa, the Masjid of Prophets. These spectacular age-old sites truly make Iraq the land of prophets and imams, the land of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, and indeed the birthplace of OPEC. My dear colleagues, tomorrow we will have the opportunity to launch at Al-Shab Hall in Bab al-Mu'azzam our book entitled OPEC 60 Years and Beyond, a story of courage, cooperation, and commitment. How apt what we heard from Professor Alawi, laying the historical foundations for our discussions in this important hall in the next 2 days. This special publication chronicles the 60-year history of OPEC with its many achievements and challenges. What better place to launch this book than right here in Baghdad, where it all began. Between the 10th and the 14th of September 1960, representatives from 5 courageous oil-producing countries descended on Al-Shab Hall in Bab al-Mu'azzam district in downtown Baghdad. Fuad Rouhani of Iran, Dr. Talat al-Shaibani of Iraq, Ahmed Said Umar of Kuwait, Abdullah al-Tariki of Saudi Arabia, and Dr. Juan Pablo Perez Alfonso of Venezuela. 5 courageous guys. This meeting, known as the historic Baghdad Conference, was highly successful, and these 5 visionary leaders became OPEC's founding fathers, spearheading the establishment of the organization. After that meeting, Dr. Perez Alfonso of Venezuela remarked, "We are now united, we are making history." Although these founding members each arrived in this city of Baghdad with different objectives, expectations, and priorities, they realized that their common interests outweighed any differences they may have at the outset. Indeed, they understood that cooperation on issues of common concern would be far more effective than trying to act alone. They understood that unity in purpose is a source of great strength. These ideals upon which OPEC has based its foundation have stood the test of time and are as relevant today in 2022 as they were in 1960. Indeed, this has been our recipe for success over the last 6 decades and will continue to guide us well into the future. Iraq has been an integral part of this rich history since day one and has continued to play a leading role in OPEC affairs ever since. Over the last 6 years, Iraq has been a major force in OPEC's efforts to achieve sustainable oil market stability through the watershed Declaration of Cooperation framework between OPEC and non-OPEC countries that Professor Alawi made reference to in his remarks. It played a key role at the outset in brokering consensus among 24 countries, the first time in history of oil, the first time in history of OPEC, and thanks to the leadership role of Iraq. This unprecedented multilateral initiative in energy cooperation has seen OPEC come together with 10 non-OPEC participating countries to help bring balance and stability to the market. The Declaration of Cooperation framework has been a lifeline for this industry, particularly in times of crisis. It was instrumental in rescuing the industry from the brink of collapse following the downturn in 2014-2016. Then again in 2020, facing a global pandemic, the framework reacted quickly and decisively when in April 2020, we witnessed global demand plummet by about 20 million barrels a day. And for the first time, you know what? West Texas Intermediate, the American benchmark, went into negative territory for the first time. Your Excellency, I recall on that fateful day, sitting in my boardroom in Vienna with colleagues, several of them here, and we continued to watch the screens go in red, until it hit $10, and we said, wait a minute, are we dreaming? But between $10 and minus, it took less than 30 minutes until it hit minus $38 a barrel. And I turned to my colleagues, I said, okay, we need to switch off. We need to call it a day. We need to go back to school to learn new models and theories, because I've never been taught in school or in college that one day sellers of commodities will have to pay buyers to take their commodity, because that's what we saw in New York on that fateful day. Iraq was a leading force in helping the Declaration of Cooperation address these critical challenges, and it continues to contribute its deep experience and expertise to this process through our joint ministerial committees as well as the joint ministerial meetings. In this regard, I want to recognize His Excellency Ihsan Abdul Jabbar Ismail for his tireless efforts as Iraq's Minister of Oil and head of its delegation to OPEC. Ihsan, we would not have been able to achieve what we did without his commitment, his flexibility, adaptability to these changes. Additionally, we are pleased that Iraq continues to demonstrate its support for the longer-term Charter of Cooperation, which was endorsed at the 6th OPEC and non-OPEC ministerial meeting held in July of 2019. The Charter provides an ongoing institutional framework for cooperation between OPEC and our non-OPEC partners, facilitating dialogue among stakeholders in the interest of producers, consumers, and the global economy. I should also point out that Iraq was the first country to ratify the Charter, which is just another sign of its leadership imprint within our organization and the wider Declaration and Charter of Cooperation frameworks. My dear friends, I would like to now shift to today's event and share with you briefly OPEC's views on the current and future trajectory of the global oil and energy markets. As mentioned earlier, this forum over the years has gone from strength to strength to become such an influential forum, not only for Iraq, but for the entire Middle East region and by extension the world. It continues to attract leading energy figures from across the global industry. And indeed, this year's edition continues to raise the bar once again. I would also like to commend the government of the Republic of Iraq and the Iraq Energy Institute, as well as all members of the organizing team here for preparing such an outstanding forum. This year's lineup of speakers and the substance-rich program you have developed are very impressive. This year's event comes as a true crossroads moment in this industry. Just as the world continues to seemingly be emerging from the unprecedented impacts of the COVID-19 global pandemic, it is now having to deal with severe disruptions as a result of the war in Ukraine. The impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic are evidently receding in some parts of the world, but it is clear it is not yet fully behind us, as exhibited by the recent lockdowns in many of China's major population hubs, including the country's economic capital, Shanghai, with a population, I'm told, of over 26 million people. While these lockdowns have recently been relaxed, we need to remain vigilant of the pandemic and its consequences for the oil market. We must be prepared for the long haul and any potential bumps in the road in addressing this challenge. Other challenges include rising inflation, aggravated supply chain issues, high sovereign debt levels in many of our member countries, in many regions, and expected monetary tightening by central banks in the US, the UK, Japan, and the European Central Bank. On the supply side, we also need to continue to monitor the impacts of a combined total release of roughly 330 million barrels of crude from strategic reserves, the majority of it expected to come onto the market between May and October of this year. These issues are all converging at a time in which our industry continues to seek out solutions to address climate change, as we heard from Professor Alawi, as part of the ongoing energy transition. The challenges before us are enormous. And we have seen recently that the strains and conflicts related to energy affordability, energy security, and the need to aggressively reduce carbon emissions require a delicate balancing act. We don't need quick fixes. We need thoughtful, comprehensive, and sustainable solutions. And there is no better place than the Iraq Energy Institute and the American University to provide us with these important apolitical platforms to dispassionately address these issues. And we must listen to all voices, and ensure all viewpoints are considered. A holistic approach to addressing all these issues will help us avoid unwanted consequences, such as the price volatility that we are witnessing and the market distortions that Professor Alawi made reference to. There continue to be radical voices out there predicting the end of oil or the end of fossil fuels. However, our research and analysis show us otherwise. According to our World Oil Outlook in OPEC, our flagship publication, which looks at the longer-term projections for the industry, the global economy in 2045 will be more than double the size it was in 2020, from around $125 trillion in 2020 to about $270 trillion in 2045, of course based on the 2017 purchasing power parity. The global population is also expected to reach 9.5 billion people by 2045, a phenomenal growth of about 20%. As a result of these demographic and economic changes, global energy demand is set to increase from 275 million barrels of oil equivalent a day in 2020 to 352 million barrels of oil equivalent by 2045. My dear colleagues, no single source of energy can meet this energy demand growth alone. Demand for other renewables, combining mainly solar, wind, and geothermal energy, represents the largest incremental contribution to the future energy mix, rising from 6.8 million barrels of oil equivalent per day in 2020 to close to 36.6 million barrels of oil equivalent per day in 2045. Moreover, it is also the fastest growing energy source with its share in the global primary energy mix. This means renewables' share of the energy mix is projected to rise from 2.5% in 2020 to 10% in 2045. Clearly, multiple sources of energy are required to meet this rise in demand. Oil is forecast to remain the fuel with the largest share of the global energy mix until 2045. In 2020, oil accounted for 30% of the global energy requirements. By 2045, it is expected to account for approximately 28%. Oil and gas together are still expected to account for more than 50% in this time horizon. With these projections, my dear colleagues, we need to ensure energy is accessible and affordable for all. We must transition to a more inclusive, fair, and equitable world in which every person has access to energy, as referenced in the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 7. In this so-called energy sustainability trilemma, all moving parts must move in unison. Of course, emissions must be aggressively addressed, but tackling emissions has many parts, as evidenced by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, as well as the Paris Agreement. It is not just one path for all, whether that be a country or an industry. The capacities and national circumstances of developing countries, such as ours in OPEC, must be taken into account in all actions going forward. In order to not render countries already struggling even more besieged, it is necessary to carefully consider the adverse socio-economic impacts on these countries due to mitigation activities in order to identify remediation measures and share best practices. Another issue of urgent international importance is the significant drop in investments in our industry that we have witnessed over the years, which has not been able to recover since 2014. Investments are the lifeblood of this industry. Cumulative oil-related investment requirements amount to $11.8 trillion in the 2021 to 2045 period. Of this, 80%, or $9.2 trillion is in the upstream, with another $1.5 trillion and $1.1 trillion needed in the downstream and the midstream, respectively. Any shortfall could have severe consequences, particularly if supply falls behind demand growth. We could see crude oil and product shortages. In fact, we even feel a bit of this pressure in today's market, to put it very mildly. If circumstances, however, worsen, there will be heightened volatility and a severe economic fallout. At OPEC, we believe that multilateralism should be at the heart of our energy, climate, and sustainable development future. OPEC and our member countries, including Iraq, have been directly involved in the evolution of the multilateral UNFCCC, whose core elements, particularly equity, common but differentiated responsibilities, and national circumstances, must remain central to all processes moving forward. There is no doubt that the oil and gas industry can leverage its resources and expertise to help unlock a low-emissions future, through its role as a powerful innovator in developing clean and more efficient technological solutions to help reduce emissions. Some examples being talked about include the carbon capture and utilization and storage technologies, blue hydrogen, as well as the circular carbon economy, all of which are designed to help improve overall environmental performance and reduce our carbon footprint. Investing in these technologies while harnessing the reduce, reuse, recycle, and remove carbon principles are all critical parts towards a sustainable future. These principles not only minimize the environmental impacts of the greenhouse gas emissions, but also contribute in no small measure to achieving socio-economic development and prosperity for our people. Let us not forget that climate change and energy poverty are two sides of the same coin. The unfortunate reality for developing countries, however, is that a staggering 759 million people worldwide did not have access to electricity in 2019. Moreover, there were roughly 2.6 billion people, or 34% of the global population, who did not have access to clean cooking fuels and technologies, exposing them to high levels of household air pollution. As an industry, we must take action and approach these critical issues together through dialogue and cooperation, ensuring that no one is left behind in the energy transition. We need to ensure that all aspects of the energy trilemma are comprehensively addressed. This means working with each other and not against each other. It is in the interest of each and every one of us to evolve a sustainable energy future that works not just for some of us, but for all of the world's people. And I would like to re-emphasize and reiterate that this university, the American University, and the Iraq Energy Institute have a pivotal role to play in this regard. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in closing, it is my hope that through our common efforts to promote oil market stability and a fair and inclusive energy transition, that we will be able to convene here in Iraq to celebrate another 60 years of success together. Shukran jazilan.
Your Excellency, thank you. We are honored to welcome this morning keynote.
This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live.